All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Broadcasting Seeds. I am your host, Bennett. Tonight, we've got Nestor Arce. Now, I'm going to let him tell you who he is, what he does, and where you can find him.
Well, very cool. And thank you for having me on, Bennett. So
Absolutely.
awesome. So my name is Nestor Arce, and I am a writer. I'm a filmmaker. I'm also an adventurer. That last one's a little bit of a fun moniker, but I'm really just like a weird guy online with a camera who just likes to, go out and find just really interesting things during my travels and sort of kind of put A and B together. Um, Throughout my years, going on missions trips, going on vacations. I've encountered a lot of really interesting things, and I've also found a lot of really interesting things that have sort of let me down a lot of rabbit holes. And I finally thought, like, look, I have a lot of training in filmmaking. I was a student at New York Film Academy for a couple of months, and I figured, you know what, let me try to get out there and join the conversation with people because now we're living in the day of the age of the internet. And so back then it was really difficult to find people who kind of shared in those same interests of, like, just strange and weird things. But I feel like the internet now has, like, sort of gotten people like you and me and even others who are listening together, and we're able to sort of expand on that conversation.
Absolutely. What's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, so the best place for you to find me is on Instagram at the Nestor Arce. I also have a website, thenestorarce.com, where you can find all my links. Although, if you really want to reach me, the best way to do it is through my Instagram. You can also email me at thenestorarce@gmail.com.
Awesome. Awesome. So, for people who are hearing your name for the first time, um, how did you end up walking this line between like adventure, filmmaking, and the unexplained? Like, what was your like gateway into this whole thing?
Oh man, that's like my favorite question. That's the one you ask all your guests on their
It
show, and
is. It's the
uh,
first question.
yeah, I'm glad to answer that. So let's start at the beginning. As a kid, I was born in Puerto Rico in a town called Calle. So my earliest memories in Puerto Rico were just living on this really nice property, two bedroom, two bathroom house with my parents and my sister. And I would just run around. And I remember this property was in the midst of, like, this valley. One of the most beautiful things about Puerto Rico is that you get to wake up every morning, you get to look outside, and it feels like you're in another world. It feels like paradise on earth. But
Mhm.
there's something that is just a little sort of strange, kind of off with it. And you're kind of just wondering, all right, like, this place is a little too good to be true. And sure enough, as we continue on with my story, I'll tell you about an encounter that I had on that property when I was just about 6 years old. So during that time, I remember my father had a VCR, and he had a tape of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And I remember my father talking about it. He was just like, "Man, this movie is so awesome. Like, I want you guys to see it." And so I remember he spent the entire afternoon repairing this VCR so we could just watch the movie. He managed to fix it. He popped in the tape. We watched it, and I was like, "Man, like, this is really cool." Like, you have a character out there who's, like, sort of cynical, but then he goes out into the world and he just
Yeah.
experiences these things that sort of challenge his own beliefs, his own, like, conventions and all that. And I thought that was, like, really cool. So I'm like, huh, like, you know, when we grow up, like, as boys, like, we either want to be James Bond or we want to be Indiana Jones. You either want to be like,
Agreed.
yeah, you want to be the clean cut guy, or you want to be the guy who's just, like, rough and tumble, walking around with, like, cuts all over him. I wanted to be the guy who was just rough and tumble. That was just always me. I always loved getting dirty outside, playing, exploring the woods and all that. And so I was like, you know what? I kind of want to like be like Indiana Jones. Like this stuff is so cool, man. Now, just to build upon that, the one story that I can tell you that sent me on sort of this gateway, this path to high strangeness. And I really thought about this because I knew you were going to ask me that question. So I'm like, I've had so many experiences throughout my life that I couldn't just pick one. But then I thought of this one. I think this one's it. And so I remember one night. It was during the end of the year or the beginning of the year. Now, understanding that in Puerto Rico, we basically celebrate two Christmases. We have Christmas on the 25th, and then I believe it's at the beginning of January, January 6th, we celebrate Three Kings Day. Basically, it's just an excuse for Puerto Ricans to just do
Right.
Christmas all over again.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember around this time, I was sitting in my living room cross legged. It was like 9 o'clock at night. There was like the skit show on that I used to love watching. And normally my parents would have me in bed by like 8:30. But on occasion, during the evenings when this skit show would come on, my parents would let me stay up a little bit late. And they're like, all right, you can watch it and then straight back to bed. So during this night, as I'm sitting there in front of the TV, I feel like a presence watching me. And I don't know if you've ever been out somewhere, maybe in your home or in the middle of the woods or just somewhere where you're just isolated alone, but you just have this sinking feeling that something is just staring at you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So suddenly I look over to my right, and in Puerto Rico, we have screen doors, right? So you could just like see through the outside of the patio and all that. And as I look to the right, I'm looking at the screen door. I see what looks like a red piece of cloth just sort of swoosh away from the door, almost as if something kind of like was trying to avoid my gaze,
Mhm.
and it just went. And I was like, what is that? So I ran out, I went onto the balcony, and there was nothing there. I believe I also ran around the property because in the property, it was basically all fenced in. So the only way you could get onto the property was basically if you broke in, if you just hopped over the fence and essentially did, you know, just spied on us. But I didn't find anything. And so if you were to ask me, what was sort of the gateway that kind of led me down this path? I think that was probably the moment that led me down this road of like high strangeness. And it eventually led me into the gospel and me accepting the fact that there are malevolent forces in the world, but then that are also benevolent forces. So I think that's sort of the kind of like the pinpoint on the map that you could
Yeah.
put as to where all that started.
Just kind of heading down that road.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself more as like a storyteller, or like an investigator or a witness? Or does it really depend on the situation?
Yeah, I think, whenever I do like the film stuff, I think it's a little bit of all three. You kind of just have to play the roles.
Right.
You have to be like the witness because in order to document the story, sometimes if you're like the main eyewitness, like, that plays into and that plays a factor into it. But then you also have to be a good communicator, storyteller in order to then convey those ideas effectively. And in terms of investigator, yeah, obviously, like you want to make sense of these experiences. You want to make sense of the things that you've witnessed or maybe things that other people have witnessed and see if there's any validity to their stories or to their experiences. And then decide, all right, is this something that's worth putting together? And how then can I present that out into the world so that other people can learn from it and also provide some sort of entertainment value?
Right. That's the truth. I mean, yeah, it's a balancing act for sure.
It is.
It is. Absolutely. So, what is it about the unexplained that keeps pulling you back in, man? Like, yeah, I know we get projects, right? We do
Yeah.
projects, but then, like, what just keeps you going?
Hmm.
Like curiosity. Is it meaning? Something more personal? You know?
Yeah, I think for me, this is like a personal journey for me. And it does involve curiosity. It does involve a lot of, in the past, it used to be a little bit of obsession, which was not good.
Hmm.
But I think a little bit was, or at least mostly now, it is curiosity in the sense of you sort of want to find out what a lot of this stuff is because it kind of just helps to develop your position on what it is that you believe in, or it sometimes could show something new and challenge whatever it is that you believe in, not so much in a bad way, but also in a good way, right? I mean, as human beings, we all have our biases. And one of the things that we're afraid of is encountering something that is unknown to us that is going to challenge what it is that we believe in. Now, throughout my life, I've encountered both things that enhance my beliefs and things that also challenge my beliefs, in which I would have to then go like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I
Right.
should change my position on that. And that's not always a bad thing, to be honest with you. It takes a certain level of maturity as a person in order for them to just accept, like, you know what? I'm just a human being. I'm living in this world that is beyond my understanding and accept the fact that I don't know everything. And then allow that wisdom or knowledge to then sort of humble you and sort of realign you in the sense where you're like, you know what? Yeah, maybe I wasn't right, but thank you for that anyway, because now that's going to then push me to improve on my research. It's going to push me to improve on my skill sets and also how I communicate with people and also how I sort of uh, take in information and then put out information. So I think that's just really important to balance all that out.
For sure. So I grew up in Connecticut and had a whole bunch of, I wouldn't say a whole bunch, but I had a few Puerto Rican girlfriends.
Oh, you a bad
Um,
boy.
yeah. So with that being said, though, uh, you come from a pretty superstitious culture,
Yes.
is what I'll call it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you, which was always intrigued me, just always.
Mhm.
And one of my best friends growing up when I was young, 7, 8, 9, he was Puerto Rican. And his family kind of adopted me. It was amazing. Food was
Nice.
ridiculous.
Yeah, you can't complain with food.
They were from San German, which
Ah,
is
okay.
where it's on the east coast or west coast of
Yeah, I
Puerto Rico,
think
of
it's
the
more
island.
towards like the central west around there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and either way, just I have a lot of I've had a lot of exposure to the culture. But with that being said, do you think most people underestimate how often like strange brushes up against like everyday life?
Mm. Well, I'll tell you one thing. In my travels in to Puerto Rico and through Central South America, the one thing that I've noticed is that the difference between us here in like these Western countries, or rather more westernized culturally,
Hmm.
and countries like South America or in the Caribbean is that they're really, really open to the paranormal. They're
And the
really open to
supernatural
these
in
and
general,
the
yeah,
supernatural and all this
for
stuff.
sure.
I'll tell you this really interesting story. When I was down in Guatemala, I believe it was last year, or I think it was last year in February. I'm not sure. I have the photos up on my Instagram for anyone who wants to see. But my wife and I decided to take 2 weeks to go to Guatemala. And so one of the activities that I had planned there was to hike Volcán de Fuego, the fire volcano, which is like the main thing to like the main attraction to do over there.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, man, it was probably, physically speaking, one of the toughest things I've ever done. I was just not in
Right.
shape for it. And then I must have climbed probably, I think it was like 13,000 feet. And just imagine just a straight up 8 hour hike. And there's really no like flat ground. It's just, you're just
Challenging.
climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. And so we did all that. And we ended up camping there overnight. But before we ended up doing that, we went to the volcano. So two of the there were two groups. One of the groups ended up staying at the camp, and then the group that I was in, we ended up going out to the actual volcano to see if we could see any eruptions
Mhm.
and take photos and all that Instagram worthy stuff. What ended up occurring as we were walking down this trail, I remember joking to one of my buddies, and I was like, man, like it's so isolated out here because you basically hear a ringing in your ears. Like, how just it's just so quiet that it's just like you feel a stillness in your ears. And I'm like joking to, my buddy who was with me on the trip. He was like, man, it's so quiet out here. I'm like, yeah, like this would be a really interesting place to like get rid of somebody if you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
just as I said that, the tour guide in front of us, who was like leading us towards the volcano, he says, "Oh yeah, people have died here on this
Oof.
mountain." And he points down towards like a ravine, and there's like a pile of clothes, like old pile of clothes that's just still there on the rocks. He says, "Yeah,
Mm.
somebody was knocked off over here." So I'm like, "Okay, that's kind of creepy. It's a little bit of a red flag." Anyway, we continue to go to the sort of knife's edge of the volcano. Unfortunately, during that time, it was just really bad, really cloudy because during that time of the year, it was actually in August, excuse me, because in August, that's when all the storms come. It's usually the when like their winter time is. And so because it was so cloudy, we couldn't see anything,
Mm.
unfortunately. But something interesting happened. I did get something really interesting out of that trip because as we were coming back down from the volcano, this really bad wind rainstorm came and it was just knocking us down the hill onto rocks. And I'm like, this is really just weird. Like, this doesn't feel normal. Now, something that interesting that happened during that time as we were going back to the camp, um, three of our headlamps ended up going out.
Mm.
So my headlamp
Gotta
went
love
out
that.
and two people's headlamps went out. Now, mind you, the two people had rented their headlamps from the tour agency. Now, I could only imagine, all right, I don't think that the tour agency, which is like one of the, or if not the top tour agency that does these hikes, they were actually featured on National Geographic, which is really cool. But I'm like, I can't imagine a tour agency of that caliber being so careless to not charge their headlamps and allow, you know, the hikers to be in put in that sort of danger where the lights just go out pitch black. Now, I had my own headlamp, and that thing completely went out. Mind you, I had charged it fully the night before. I'm like, this is just really, really strange. And thankfully, I had a spare flashlight that I put on my cap, and that was able to save me. But as we were going up, and as soon as we were close, like we were just maybe a couple of meters away from the camp, um, I noticed screaming behind me. I'm like, what happened? And so what ended up occurring was that one of the hikers fell down one of the ravines, but thankfully there was a bush that ended up catching him. And
Hmm.
so he had to basically crawl his way back up because the tour guys and all the other hikers are having a lot of issues trying to reach the guy. And his headlamp, because his headlamp had gone out, he sort of missed the step and he just fell sideways. So that night, I ended up staying up all night just thinking about just how weird that whole experience was. And when I woke up the next morning, we ended up making our way down the volcano back to the cars to take us back to the city. I ended up asking the tour guide. I said, "Hey, let me ask you something." I'm like, "Have you noticed like anything weird around like this mountain?" Now, this is where the sort of um, openness towards the strangeness comes in these cultures. So when I asked the individual this question, his face lit up. He was like, "What?" He's like, "Let me tell you something." He told me stories of UFOs, UAPs on a mountain. He's told me stories of when he was camping out one night during the shutdowns. And I think it was in 2021, 22, around that time. He was camping out in the mountain by himself. And he told me, like, I know this mountain in and out. Like, I used to hike this mountain when I was 12 years old with my father. And so he was hiking out one night and he was in a tent. And as he's settling in, he hears footsteps outside of his tent. He hears voices. And he's like, "That's weird." Like, mind you, the park is closed during this time. Like, the public, there's not supposed to be any public access in here. But the only reason that he was able to get in there was because he actually has a storefront within the park, right? Like, he owns like a kiosk. So he has property there. And so he would manage his property during the shutdown, and then he would go off and camp and all that. So as he's hearing all these voices in the evening and hearing all these footsteps, he looks outside of his tent and there's like nobody there. He flashes his flashlight, nothing there. It's this complete pitch black. And he's like, "All right, this is kind of weird." But one of the weirder things that he told me about, as we were kind of ending the trip, we ended up taking a bit of a break, and he took a stick, he drew a circle on the ground in the dirt, and he drew 8 lines around the volcano. And I'm like, "All right." I asked him, what's all this about? He says, "Well, during one of the times that I was here in the mountain doing tours for people," he said that during the span of a week, there were 8 groups that were climbing the mountains from 8 different positions. He told me that at least one person from each of those groups had died from
Wow.
either hypothermia, either whatever natural causes. But he told me one person had died on each side of those 8 points of the mountain, which was really fascinating. And then he told me that the locals found this so strange that they ended up inviting a couple of the villagers to come in and cleanse the mountain. So I'm like, this is really interesting stuff. Then he told me, and this is sort of like the ending of the story, he told me that another time that he had climbed up to the volcano, he noticed one of the hikers had well, not, they didn't have it, but they saw a bowl on the ground. They were about to touch it, and he told them, "Do not touch that." So when they got to the bowl, he saw what looked like sacrificial items,
Mm.
dead birds, he saw all this crazy stuff on it.
Yeah.
And so that is to say that in Guatemala and in every one of these countries, whenever you're doing something as normal as hiking, like, that could turn into a really interesting experience. And if you talk to the right people, they're willing to share those stories with you. And it's very different from here in the United States, because here in the United States, like, you bring up the subject of, like, for example, like UFO, UAPs or whatnot, like, they'll look at you like you're just, dude, are you crazy? Like, you nuts? Like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
And you notice this sort of church as well. And the church is even much tougher to approach people with these
Oh,
conversations.
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't notice that as much in other countries. And I think there's something that's so beautiful about acknowledging the supernatural and acknowledging the fact that we're not just flesh and blood. Like, we inherently are supernatural beings. And
Mhm.
sort of my thought process is, if we're supernatural beings, why do we have a hard time accepting the fact that we live in a supernatural environment where all these things are occurring?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed a lot. Um, so you didn't really bring it up earlier, but um, you have a podcast.
Yeah,
So the
you knew I was
title,
gonna forget.
but the title, Shadows of the Greater Reality, it's kind of loaded.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
What does that phrase actually mean to you?
Well, I will say this. Shadows of a Greater Reality, that title was my co-host David Paxton's idea. When he had mentioned it, I was like, I kind of like the title
Yeah.
because it kind of sounds like one of those 1980s, like sort of like you know, um, unsolved
Oh
mystery,
yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's my era. So I get it
Yeah,
all, man.
so exactly. So you know it. And so we decided to title it Shadows of a Greater Reality because we talk about things that are not necessarily widely spoken about within the church culture, which is really interesting because when you look at just like secular culture, everybody's talking about the UFOs and the this and the
Yeah,
that.
right.
I mean, you understand, like, you and I grew up in an era of, like, the X-Files. We grew up in an era of, like, ghost hunters, ghost adventures, like,
Yep.
but for some reason, like, when it comes to the church, it's like, why are we having such a hard time, like, acknowledging what the secular world is already acknowledging?
Yeah.
And so these are the shadows. We talk about these sort of fringe topics, but then the greater reality is Jesus Christ. And so we in our show we want to highlight the importance of, yeah, like in this world there are forces that are against the light, but within that force is a greater reality which is connected to Christ.
Yep.
So that's kind of like the philosophy behind that
I
title.
love it. I've had a bunch of my friends on, so
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
those guys
So
are good
everybody
people.
from the Christian theological dark web
Yes,
to
love them,
sourdoughs and
love them.
Sasquatches and
Yeah,
L.A. Marzulli and
yes,
Vicky Joy Anderson. Just really cool people. Mondo
they really are.
Gonzalez, I think you had on too.
Yes,
Just
we had
great,
we had
great,
Armando, yeah.
great people. So
They really are great people, and whether they know it or not, they probably don't, but they've sort of put me on this trajectory spiritually that
yeah,
is just like, man, like, I'm just so grateful for them even being on the podcast because when we had them on, it's like I'm not just having you on just so that I can bring attention to the show. Like I'm
right.
really just doing this for me. Like I want to talk to like the top people out there and understand a lot of the things that have occurred in my life. And I think that was just so essential,
Yep.
especially in the case of Vicky. Vicky's great, man, and she really brought a lot of answers to a personal experience that I had growing up in a haunted house, and it really just brought so much peace to me because when you go through these really crazy experiences growing up and you try to relate to someone within the church culture, they just they'll laugh you off, they'll kick you out of circles, they'll kind of just
Yeah, right.
do all that stuff.
Mhm.
But to be honest with you, Vicky wasn't like that, and a lot of the people that we've spoken to, they weren't like that at all.
No, none
And
of
they
them.
really, yeah,
None of those
exactly.
people. Not
Yeah,
at
so
all.
they really embraced, sort of my stories. They embraced, what I'm doing. Um, and it just really felt like a breath of fresh air speaking to them. So
Yeah.
they've all been just amazing people.
Yeah, and I see Doc Brown too. He's a good friend of mine.
Ah,
Good
Justin,
friend of
yes.
mine. He got
There you
his
go.
book right here. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's the homie Justin. Justin's
Yeah.
great.
He's the
Yeah,
man.
he is.
So with that being said, you just asked peeked the question. So do you believe like like the phenomenon people experience, do you feel like they're fragments of a larger like hidden system talking about the church and other things, right? And just what people believe and not, or more like isolated anomalies?
Ooh, that's funny you talk about that because I'm playing a video game right now. I don't know, you ever heard of the video game Control? They
I
kinda deal with
I
that whole
haven't,
topic.
but I'm gonna write it down right now.
Check it out. It kinda just reminded me of that question. So, in terms of what we're noticing on a grander scale, in terms of, like, fragments, really I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I think there is a grander truth out there that's beyond our sort of cerebral understanding
Absolutely.
that we can only um, sort of perceive on a limited level because our brains only operate at such a point where whenever we do have these paranormal experiences or supernatural experiences,
Mhm.
whether it could be demonic or angelic or
Yep.
whatnot, we get glimpses of that in our lives. And
Yeah.
so you look back in scripture, you read the story of Daniel and Ezekiel. I mean, whenever these guys would see angels, like these guys practically just about fainted,
Yeah.
even though ironically enough, they acknowledge God and they acknowledge his supernatural presence. It's one thing to speak that and acknowledge that, but then just to actually see that with your own eyes, I cannot imagine the horror that these guys went through. And I think
But
that's probably
also like
another. Yeah,
validation.
absolutely. A lot of validation. And I think that's probably another reason why in modern Christianity, mostly in the West, we have such a hard time talking about that because I think the moment we start veering off into these topics, it brings a lot of fear. It's like I understand that God is real. I understand that angels or demons are real, but just imagine just seeing one with your own eyes, and
Oh
just
yeah.
imagine just the sort of like Lovecraftian type of insanity that would bring to your own mind, to your own heart. I think that's probably another reason why we're so cautious when and rightfully so, we should be cautious when we approach these topics.
Yeah, for sure. I see bring up something for me that makes me realize, and this was a very life-changing moment for me is so I was in the military for about 10 years and deployed all over the world. And I, as part of a couple of the situations I was in within that in the military at the time, late like mid 90s in Bosnia, and then a couple times later on like in Egypt and a couple different places. I I actually witnessed and encountered true evil. And I
Really.
don't think that happens to a lot of people. And that was a genuinely unsettling, life-changing thing. Like, it wasn't like a situation like, "Ooh, that was creepy." Like, this was the type of situation that just it it could break you if you
Yeah,
weren't prepared or had, any sort of religious base or anything like that, I'm saying. So,
right.
so to twist that then into a question, um, like, is there like an investigation or a story that genuinely unsettled you? Like, not in that was creepy way, but like in a world view shifting way. And again, I get this because um of the culture that you come from. Like, this stuff is real to so many. Like, it's part of eh, it's just part of the culture. It's because they're not closed off to it. And I think that's an amazing thing for a culture to have. Um,
Yeah,
and it's not just Puerto Rican culture, it's also
right.
South America, but there's so many Africans cultures that are the same, and
Yeah,
Asians. Like, they literally celebrate all these things, right?
sure.
So
Yeah,
anyway, I just think it's a good basis.
yeah.
But like those worldview shifting ways that you've like situation that you've dealt with.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I could tell you one of my personal stories going back to Puerto Rico. And we can this is definitely gonna lead off into like a whole rabbit trail, but
Don't they all?
they all do, man.
Because everything rhymes. That's the other
It
thing.
does.
That's like it's one of my I have two main things that I say all the time. Everything rhymes and we don't know shit.
That's
So
right.
so the,
That's right. Well,
the
I'll tell you.
mottos I live by.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you what, man. So this next story that I have, this also happened to me in Puerto Rico. And this is something that sort of shifted my worldview and also led me down the path I'm in right now. And I mean, let's just get into it. Let's talk about chupacabra.
Mhm.
Right, let's talk about Chupacabra because we're gonna like go down this path of Puerto
I just
Rican
went
myths,
for
legends. Let's
sure,
just do
man.
it, man.
I just did an
So
episode on it a few weeks ago, so
awesome.
I
So
love
you
it.
exactly. So you basically know the whole history of the
Okay.
Chupacabra. The 1995 it became like really popularized, and pretty much there was a lady whose name was Madeline Tolentino. So Madeline Tolentino, according to her, she witnessed this creature on her property feasting on her livestock, just draining it of blood, the whole story.
Yeah.
So when the investigation occurred, she described what is famously known now as the two big red eyes, it's like 3 feet tall, the spines on his back. Like if you go online, you can find the artist
Oh yeah.
drawing on that, the rendition on that. And interestingly enough, it happened in a town named Moca. Now, if you study the history of Moca and if you study Puerto Rican myths and legends, there's actually as you said, it rhymes, there's actually another legend from that region named El Vampiro de Moca, the vampire of Moca, the Moca vampire, which a lot of people believe this could be a very similar creature or a very similar um, sort of tie to the Chupacabra. Now, a lot of theories spawned off from this. A lot of people think maybe this was like UFOs, maybe this was like a satanic cult that was out there. Who knows? Then there's
Military experiments, all the
military
things. Yeah,
experiments,
man.
all this stuff. Absolutely. And then some people say, the more skeptic group, they say, well, we noticed something when we were talking to Miss Tolentino because we realized that she was talking about that she had seen the movie Species just a couple of months prior.
Mm.
So she may have been making it up, or she may have been sort of, you know, uh, I forget the word, but when you sort of like grab onto an image
Mhm.
and you kind of hold on to it in your subconscious, and then your subconscious sort of like
Yeah,
projects
you
that
can
out.
project it kind of to an
Correct.
extent.
Yeah. So there's theories of that happening. But regardless, ever since then, like the Chupacabra blew up
Blew
throughout
up
the world
all over
and
the Latin world.
all over, all over. And the individual who I believe should take credit for blowing up Chupacabra throughout the world, his name is Jorge Martin Miranda. Jorge Martin Miranda, my opinion, is the top paranormal investigator in Puerto Rico. Now, initially, when I was working on Temple of the Gods, it's a very short documentary film that I have on my YouTube channel where we take a look at a UFO UAP case out in El Yunque, which I believe it's considered the biggest rainforest in the US or the second biggest rainforest in
Mhm.
the US. He ended up doing an investigation of that back in the 70s. And if you watch that video, we had like an hour-long phone call, but I included a very specific clip of the phone call in that video. And really interestingly, when he was describing the fact that he had investigated this case, he had interviewed the people involved in that case, and you can see this in the video, he says that these things, when they play back the recording, because in the story, the group that had gone up there, they left like a tape recorder just playing overnight, and when they just bailed because these things are basically harassing them,
Mhm.
they just left the tape recorder recording. So when they came back, they took the tape recorder and they played it. And Jorge Martin and a couple of the other investigators, when they were hearing the tape, they sort of heard like a gibberish during all this. You could hear like the people just going crazy, screaming, just being really frantic, but they heard a gibberish. So as they slowed down the tape to a certain speed, they noticed that the gibberish was very, you could it was intelligible. Like you understand what it was saying. And according to what he told me, the tape, the beings were saying into into the into the temple of the gods, gods shall be, something like that. He said it 3 times.
Mm.
The fact that these things were relating to these people, we're gonna go into the temple of the gods, gods we shall be. And I remember asking Jorge Martin, like, who are these gods they're talking about? He's like, I don't know. Like, they're just going up into this temple. And mind you, this happened in El Yunque. Now, in El Yunque, it's a very thick mountainous region. And the Taino have a lot of history in El Yunque. And even till this day, they are still seeing uh, cases of people being abducted, people being harassed by these creatures that sometimes show up like sort of like invisible, like Predator. Like if you watch the movie
Yeah.
Predator, these things come just like translucent, almost like camouflage,
Yeah.
and like climbing on their houses. And they're also hearing gibberish coming from smaller beings. So there's a lot of correlation between these cases from like the 1970s to like current day. And Jorge Martin is still investigating uh, the cases out there. So really interestingly, I asked him, all right, so who are these gods? Why are they going inside of this mountain? And when you study the history of the Yunque, the paranormal history of the Yunque, there's a lot of UFO sightings. In fact, there's been a lot of videos, there's been a lot of stories of people saying that they see lights going in and out of the mountain all the time.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm like, all right, that's really interesting. So then I asked Jorge, I think, all right, so what's in these mountains? He says, well, there's a lot of minerals in there, a lot of just gold, just maybe iron, whatnot, like you name it's probably down there. And it's really interesting that the United States government has a really heavy presence in this national park. So I forgot how we got into this part of the interview, but I asked him, the last time I checked, they don't allow camping overnight in El Yunque anymore because according to what the official response from the government, they said, well, because of the hurricane that came in a couple of years ago, it basically destroyed all the trails. So they don't allow, just for the safety of the public, they don't allow any overnight camping. And I still remember this. He started laughing. He's like just laughing on the phone. And he tells me something along the lines of, Nestor, he's like, you and I both know that's not true. You and I both know why they don't allow camping over there at night. And I thought that was really fascinating. So anyway, we got into the whole chupacabra UFO, and now I'm going to connect this because this is something that sort of shattered my perception of reality. And this happened again in Puerto Rico. I was 8 years old. I was around like 8, 12, around that age. Don't remember. But I remember it was during the summer when my parents has sent me over to Puerto Rico from New York. And they just had me stay with my aunt,
Go
my
back to
uncle.
your roots, boy.
That's
Go back
right.
to
Go
your
back to your
roots.
roots. There you go. That's right. I literally went back to my roots. And so we went back to the countryside. So I stayed over with my aunt and uncle. They had a countryside home in this area called Guavate. And Guavate back then, like now it's like really popular. Like now, like all the cruise ships are going down
Yeah,
there.
right.
Now, like, like the Food Network's down there.
Damn
You see
it.
like guys like, yeah, you see all these guys like, was it Andrew
Yeah,
Zimmerman, like
right.
Anthony Bourdain. But back then, when I had gone there, it was just isolated. We were basically at the top of a mountain. And I would remember waking up every morning and the mountain would just be covered in like just cloud and mist. It was just beautiful. But again, there was that feeling, this foreboding feeling that I'm like, something's not right out here.
Yeah.
So there was a path just up the road from where my uncle and aunt's house was at. And this little path led into the forest. It's like a little side road, like it wasn't like paved or anything. But you could tell there had been, because like of just the way that the plants and the trees like formed, you could tell that used to be like an old pathway where people used to go
Right.
through. And every time I would pass by there, it would just always disturb me. Like there's just something not right here. And I would go over there during the daytime, nighttime. I'm like, this is something weird. Like I just keep looking straight. And I don't know what it is about this that it just looks strange. So one evening when we were coming back from church, it was Saturday night, I remember we had stopped by at the bakery. I got my little glazed donut, my little Nesquik, you know. Back then, they just used to call it quick, and we drove up the mountain like 20 minutes. Now, I remember my aunt and uncle, they parked the car in the garage, and I got out. And as soon as I got out, I felt like something calling me. I don't know if it was maybe my own imagination. I don't know if it was like something in my mind just told me, go to the path and look at it. Go to the path and look at it. So I ran up to the path, mind you, pitch black. The only light in the area is just coming from the garage. I walk up the path and I'm staring into this pathway. And as I'm looking into the darkness of this forest, at first I don't see anything. But then I start seeing what looks like red eyes.
Mm.
And these red eyes are like swaying back and forth. And I remember just being so frightened. I ran back down the road and I locked myself in the room, in the garage room where I was staying at. And during that same week, my uncle had taken us to Blockbuster Video. And in Blockbuster Video, as I was searching these sections, I saw a documentary on Chupacabra. And on the cover of that was a man named Jorge Martin Miranda. And he basically was the guy who blew this whole phenomenon up in the world. So it was a really great honor having spoken to him. And this is a crazy part. So when I didn't tell him my story, but when I was speaking to Jorge Martin, I asked him, like, so because you're the Chupacabra expert, right? Like, so could these things, like, let's say theoretically speaking, could they like communicate telepathically? Could they like draw people into an area and sort of like, you know, communicate with them? Because throughout the years, thinking about that experience, I'm like, all right, that couldn't have been real. Like, was I just projecting that? Like, what's going on?
Right.
So he did tell me, like, yeah, I have tons of cases where I've spoken to people and this creature has the ability of communicating telepathically and actually drawing people out of certain areas and into the areas where they're at. So I was like, that was kind of creepy. And that sort of challenged my notion of normality.
Yeah.
Because at first, you know, when you're a kid, especially in Puerto Rico, you hear all these crazy stories, chupacabra, UFOs, and all that stuff. And like, hey, that stuff is really cool. But when you actually get to experience that and feel that, it's like, what do I even do with this?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
how does my worldview fit into that now?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It definitely changes, right? So,
Absolutely.
I mean, bottom line is, even if a fraction of these phenomenon are real, what does that mean for how we understand reality, humanity, and our place in it?
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, that shakes people. Like and that's part of the reason you get so many people that, you know, I just think of the hear no evil, see no evil, you know, the monkeys that have their, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, there's something to be said about people who have those experiences. And again, I go back to like, how many people like me, like Christians, have gone throughout life, have had experiences like this, but then we have no place to sort of express these experiences.
Yeah, we do
You
now.
know, and it's tough. We do now. Yeah, and that's why I'm so thankful for this community. And it's been such a blessing being here and being able to share my stories with people like you, people like Ricky and Shelly from Christian Theological Dark Web, so many others. And it kind of just puts into perspective, like, yeah, you're not so crazy. Like, there's
No, not at
other
all.
people who have gone through these experiences, and
Yeah.
most importantly, they are connected. Like, even when you read through scripture and even when you even talk to other people, it's like, yeah, this stuff's starting to make a lot more sense to me.
This podcast started as I mean, like, my introduction to this whole thing is Bigfoot. And you know, when I was a kid, I mean, some ghost stuff too, paranormal stuff too, but this was going to be a Bigfoot podcast. So far
Yeah,
from that at this point, like I can't even, like I
yeah,
just can't go back because like I said before, everything rhymes. So,
right.
I mean, with that too, do you think, um, especially where you live in New York City. I mean, it's one of the cultural hubs of the world, not just
Yeah,
the country. Do you think we're approaching a cultural moment where and I'll say it makes me always think of the show, The
yeah.
Fringe, right? The cultural moment where the fringe becomes unavoidable for the mainstream.
I think we're already there.
Yeah.
I think we're already there, like, you watch movies, TV shows, like, you watch Stranger Things, deals with, like, topics of,
It's
like,
wild,
dimensional
right?
travel, right? You see that movie, what was it? Age of Disclosure just
Mm,
came out. You
yep.
had guys like Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, talking about UAPs, and you have, like, all these, like, senators and, like, Congress people saying, like, "Yeah, all this angel stuff is real, by the way." Like, we have, like,
Yeah, right.
diagrams of how they supposedly, like, operate. I think we're already there
Yeah. Have you
culturally. I
seen
think
American Sasquatch yet? The David Paulides documentary that he just put out
I
ab-
was not aware of
about
that.
Sasquatch? You should check it out. I'm just saying.
Nice.
It breaches the DNA of Bigfoot. And
Really?
I mean, this is all stuff that I've been involved in it for years. I mean,
Yeah.
better part of a decade. But a lot of people just haven't really thought about it because it was squashed,
Right.
for lack of a better way
Yeah.
of putting it. But anyway,
Yeah,
squashed,
no.
squatched. Um, so I mean, what do you think happens when people start asking better questions instead of demanding immediate answers?
I see all this stuff as sort of it's like a soft disclosure that's
Yeah,
happening.
right.
It's sort of like you watch these things on TV, you read books about it, uh, you go to the movies and, like, they're talking about, like, yeah, like, aliens disguised as human beings, for example. You watch the
Yeah,
Men in Black movies, but people laugh at that, and they think, "Oh, that's funny," and all that stuff, but there are legitimate cases out there where people have reported strange beings disguised as humans. And interestingly, if you read scripture, it says that even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light.
yeah,
So I'm like, okay,
absolutely.
there's some truth there. I've never seen an angel disguised as a human being. I'm not putting myself out there,
No,
but
right.
if you have seen it and you have like a believable story, I'm like, yeah. I mean, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, we're supernatural beings living in a supernatural world. Like it shouldn't surprise us, especially when the you go out there, the secular world and media and all that stuff, they're like openly embracing all this. So to me, it's not such a strange thing once you sort of start dropping that mindset that you were raised in, the fact that, oh, you're just flesh and blood and life doesn't have any meaning. And so you just go to work and come back and just pay bills. Like life is so much greater than that.
Yeah, for sure.
And once you start opening up that can of worms, baby is on because now you have something you have to have something to ground yourself on when you go down that path. But yeah, I think a lot of that stuff is just soft disclosure and the culture has embraced that long ago. You look at the history of the West, you look at the Enlightenment age, just sort of how it removed spirituality out of culture and then it became all science based.
Yeah.
But weirdly enough, not what we're noticing in this, if I could call it a new age, is that now you're seeing that spirituality entering into the culture, entering into the new zeitgeist, where people are acknowledging, yeah, maybe there is more to life than what we've been taught in schools, what we've watched on television. And maybe life isn't as simple as we thought. Maybe it's more complex than just what we witness on every day.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I mean, you got a lot of stuff going on, man. Like the your Expedition Society journal, you've got the
Yeah.
podcast, you've got YouTube channel, you've got short documentaries like The Temple of the Gods,
Yeah.
all these things, which we will share all that stuff in the show notes, right? But what projects or investigations are you most excited about that you've like got going right now?
Yeah. So right now we're working on a series. It's a 4-part series called Myths and Legends from Old San Juan.
Nice.
And pretty
Talk
much
about an
that's
old city. Man.
it is ancient. It's much more ancient
Oh
than what
yeah.
people realize. Like when I say ancient, no, I'm not just talking about when the Spanish got there. I'm
Yeah.
talking even before that. And so as I was traveling in San Juan one day, I'm noticing a lot of just really interesting things. I'm noticing just pieces of architecture. I'm noticing like pieces of the culture that I'm like, people are not paying attention to this. Like, this is beautiful because when people go to Puerto Rico, they mostly just go there for partying and pictures and concerts. But very rarely do we nosedive into the culture of Puerto Rico and specifically the city of San Juan. So I started working on a documentary based on that city and diving into 4 really important myths that are tied to that city. We ended up initially releasing one of the episodes earlier in the year, and some people really enjoyed it, but I found 2 issues with it. I felt like I was just cramming way too much into the first
It
episode
always
because that
felt
was
like that.
yeah, and then number 2, I'm like, some of the research was a little shoddy, so we ended up going back to the drawing board, and as I've been exposed to more people in terms of just the knowledge and wisdom that they bring in, I decided to take a step back and I'm like, I think we could take this series so much further because there's just something here in the history of not just Puerto Rico, but in the city of San Juan that I think would be really cool for people to actually see. And it really just opens up into the paranormal, the supernatural. The first episode, we go over the legend of Juan Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth. And as I was filming that episode, I found something really, really interesting. Not saying I'm gonna like challenge science or
Yeah,
anything, but
yeah.
I found something that was really fascinating that not a lot of people know about, at least from the research that I've done. And I can't wait to show that off to people and see what they think. And let's just put it this way: there's a lot of places that people consider the fountain of youth, but I may have potentially found another place within the city that I think we could probably drop that label on as well. Because there's just so many connections there that I'm like, man, like I need to keep quiet about this. Number one,
Yeah.
number 2, let me do the research before I actually release it and show people. But I think what we found is pretty fascinating. So I can't wait to release that. And we're gonna get to work on that next week with the VO and all that. And yeah, it should be out there hopefully in the next few months. So I'm
Awesome.
really excited to show that off. And we also have the second episode as well. In the second episode, we deal with the spiritual world of Old San Juan, and we go into potential portal sites. We go into gateways. We even went into the cemetery in the area, which is considered the oldest cemetery, I believe, in the country. And in that cemetery, there's actually a tomb of a professed witch,
Wow.
and we get into some really crazy stuff in that series. So I can't wait to actually launch this, and it's all going to connect by the last episode. It involves things like ghosts, portals, potentially secret societies. But anyway, that's what I'm working on right now.
Awesome. Awesome. So if someone listens to this episode and they walk away with one thing, plant those seeds, man. Broadcast that seed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Broadcasting a seed. All right. How about this? So whenever we work on Shadows of a Greater Reality, or whenever I'm doing anything that involves things from the documentary I'm working on or these conversations, I always like to go back by the quote from the late and great C.S. Lewis. And so I'm paraphrasing it here, but he basically says something along the lines of, when it comes to the topic of demons, spiritual warfare, we can either take two different approaches. We can either become so obsessed with it, or we can just completely just reject the idea and ignore it. But in either case, the devil basically gets the glory. He wins, right? Because the idea is that he's trying to drag you away from the kingdom of God. He's trying to drag you away from representing him and being an ambassador in his kingdom, and ultimately hiding the ultimate truth from you, which is that salvation is found in him alone. And so I know in our community, like, we love, man, like, getting into these rabbit holes. We love investigating. We love, like, connecting dots. And I'm like, oh, dude, I'm all for that. Like, I'm with you guys. But I think my sort of piece of counsel, which I've had to preach to myself first and foremost, you know, is, okay, you know, don't forget that as you're going down this rabbit trail, have something that's going to stabilize you. For me, that's the word of God, right? Whenever things start getting a little too hairy and I start feeling that conviction in my heart, when I'm like, all right, maybe I'm digging a little too deep into this and things are getting really dark, I'm just going to have to back out. And, you know, even this holiday season, as we're divulging into all these pieces of research and these books and these documentaries, like, I would say, hey, you know what? All that stuff is really cool, but don't forget your family. Don't forget God. Don't forget to meet up with your friends. Take a break, chill out with your dog, with your wife, with your friends. And I promise you, those questions, those lingering rabbit holes, they'll still be there when you come back, because it's so important for people to take care of themselves on a spiritual level. Because remember, like, part of what we do is we battle darkness. Like, we're exposing darkness. And in
Absolutely.
order to, and when we're exposing darkness, we have to be in good spiritual shape.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you were a soldier once, right?
Yeah.
Like, like, you can't just walk into combat. You got to train for it, man. Like, you got to be ready. You can't underestimate your enemy. And it's very similar in this field as well. So, my broadcasting seed is, man, like, be ready to expose the darkness. Don't underestimate the enemy, but most importantly, ground yourself in the word of God. And because he is the ultimate truth.
For sure. He's the way.
Amen.
For sure. All right. Man, I appreciate you coming on.
It's been an honor. It was a
Do
fun
me a
show.
favor and tell everybody again where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at the Nestor Arce. And you can also follow us at Shadows of a Greater Reality on YouTube. As we were discussing before, we have so many awesome guests. We've had Ellie Marzulli, Vicky Joy Anderson. We've had Derek Gilbert. We also have a couple of more episodes with so many awesome guests coming on. And yeah, just check us out at whoistruth.com, or check us out on Instagram and YouTube at Shadows of a Greater Reality.
Absolutely. All right, man. And whenever you got anything else that you want to talk about, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll have you on and
yeah,
get it out there.
Absolutely, man. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, like, when I release a documentary, I don't mind coming back and we can have a conversation about that. I think we have a lot to talk about then.
Love it. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Cobblestone streets whisper old prayers. Midnight carries voices through the warm salt air. Candles flicker slow in cathedral light. Something moves between the worlds tonight. Stories handed down like hidden maps. Blood and memory in every crack. Drums in the dark keep time with the waves. Angels and shadows both know our names.
We're walking lines you cannot see between the myth and history, where faith and fear are holding hands in the heart of this after midnight mass. Footsteps follow, but no one ever passes. Eyes in the forest where the night grows deep. Legends never die, they just don't sleep. Grandmothers say, child, don't forget. Some debts get paid in fear and sweat. History carved in bones and stone. This island never stands alone.
We taste the truth, we cannot prove. Between the scene and what we feel move. Some stories live, some spirits stay. Some prayers don't fade away. Shadows rise over San Juan, where the veil grows thin before the dawn. Every myth a living spark, burning bright inside the dark. Light and dark forever spun. Shadows rise over San Juan. Voices chanting in the hurricane wind. Every secret wants out in the end. Faith is a torch in a world gone strange, but the supernatural never change. Call the saints, call the God. Some truths hit the soul too hard. This world, our world, thread by thread, we walk with ghosts and call them friends. Old San Juan remembers. Nothing is ever really gone. Shadows rise over San Juan, where the past still breathes and carries on. Every legend sings its part, etched in stone and human hearts. Light and dark forever spun. Shadows rise over San Juan.
Shadows rise over San Juan.
Storm fades,
Footsteps
echo,
and silence.
just a sea.